Have you ever wondered where the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment and acted from that place? Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your host, Brian Berneman, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world. We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers. From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure to be joined all the way from Western Canada by Kiki Grace, Kiki, or however you want to go by. Thank you so much, Kiki, for taking the time to share with us today. For everyone that is watching and listening to us, what can you share about you and your path and who is Kiki?
What a great question. Who is Kiki? Professionally speaking, I am a somatic empowerment coach who works with psychedelics to help people tap back into who they are and be able to better express who they are in the world. So I really help people become exactly who they want to be, both in their professional life, in their relationships, in their family life, whatever it is that they're struggling with. And just express the core of who they are. I got into that work by a deep need for myself to learn how to more authentically express who I was, who I am. And when I was younger, I think as most of us do, struggle with knowing how to express our authenticity, express who we are. And I went through a really long depression from when I was basically as long as I could remember till 19 when I started trying to heal from it, I guess you would say, look at it. And that whole process taught me a lot about healing in general. I was a yoga teacher for a while. That was one of kind of my first healing paths was yoga and energy work. Then from there, and then parallel with that was psychedelic work. So when I was about 19, I had my first psilocybin experience, and I had worked with therapists before then on some of like the mental constructs as to why I was in depression, some of the misunderstandings I had, or just some of the ways that we might weave our story in a way that isn't fully true for who we are. So I had done that kind of layer of work. But it wasn't actually alleviating the feelings in my body, the actual felt sense of depression, and some of the other kind of core traumas that had led to it. And when I worked with psilocybin for the first time, I actually had the first feeling of joy. So I had been on antidepressants, which medically help you, kind of chemically help you, but psilocybin actually tapped me into the first feeling of joy that I could ever remember having. And then from then I was just like, whoa, the potential of these is wild. And I just kind of kept following the next thing there until I found and became part of a ayahuasca community in 2016, dug deep into the ayahuasca tradition, which taught me a whole way of even thinking about and approaching psychedelics, which then I transferred to my work with MDMA, MDMA, psilocybin, and 5-MeO-DMT. So that's kind of a quick synopsis. But it was really psychedelics, I have to say, and my integration work with them that moved the needle on me becoming who I am now.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's always, I always like to hear about people's path and experiences, because why we are drawn to certain things, why we choose to show up and to do this type of work that we do, a lot of times has to do with our own journey, our own story of healing. Like, this is one of the things that I usually tell everyone that I work with. I didn't learn all of these different tools, modalities, traditions to be able to work using them. I learned them because I wanted to actually go through my own journey of healing and on reconnecting with myself. And then all of this tools, I was like, oh wow, these are amazing. I want to learn deeper. And then suddenly I'm sharing them with others because I know the value of them. And one of the things, Kiki, that I wanted to ask you that you were just sharing about is, you know, there's different paths. You said, like you went through the therapy, you went through the psychedelics, you went through the yoga. Um, One of the things that I wanted to ask you in your experience was how they were they actually fitting together, how they were not
Mm,
fitting together, because we all are different, we all need something different.
mhm.
How was that experience for you as you were going through that?
That's a really good question. So the energetic medicine, I would say, that was one of the first trainings I did. So I got into a yoga practice and just became like a practitioner of yoga. But one of the first trainings I did was a training in Reiki, which kind of brought in a lot of the psychedelic learnings into understanding how like the core of who we are is actually energy. The core of the universe is actually energy. And we learn this in science and like science 10. And like when we're in school, you do learn that concept, but like you don't, or at least I hadn't like applied it to like what that actually meant. Um, and so understanding us as being an energetic being was able to, yeah, really help integrate ways that the medicines were trying to teach me that. And it gave me a language to like understanding how I had actually been relating to people most of my life from this energetic place of just like knowing something without knowing how you know it, or feeling something, or attuning, or empathy, or these things that are actually energetic experiences for a lot of us. So it gave me language that fit both the psychedelic as well as my own felt experience. And then after that, I trained in yoga for like 10 years. I became a 500-hour teacher. And in that gave me, I would say, a framework, like, because when I talk about yoga as well, I'm not meaning just like asana yoga, which we tend to think of as people doing poses to get fit. And like, while that's a big part of Western yoga and kind of how yoga has permeated even in India and stuff now, there's actually a big emphasis on just the poses, but yogic philosophy, the tradition of yoga, the eight-limbed path, Ashtanga yoga, um, is a philosophy of kind of how to move through your own evolution as an individual and how to kind of conceptualize being in the world. And again, there was like ways that mirrored the lessons that I was learning in psychedelics. So there was all of this, like, I'm learning that here, and I'm learning it here, and I'm learning it here. So there has to
Mm,
be a truth to it because there's this cohesion in all the different places that I was learning.
mm,
So that was also really helpful. Like one of the main ones, and I bring this in to with a lot of um with most of my clients at some point in yoga, there's a sutra, and I can't remember how it is in Sanskrit, but it's basically like find ease amongst the discomfort.
mm,
And when you are faced with a negative, find the opposite positive. So those are like two main just sutras in the yogic tradition that when you apply that into everyday life, if you're faced with a negative, figure out how to find the opposite positive because everything has both,
mm,
the good and the evil, the right and the wrong. Um, that was also taught to me all the time in psychedelics, that like this negative thing I went through, well, how did it serve me, or what was the benefit, or what was the lesson? There's always something good that comes from something bad.
mm,
So that would be the biggest way that they all kind of fit together, is like they had streams of just truthfulness that rang through all of them in a really fascinating way that just kept me wanting to keep learning ultimately.
mm, Beautiful. It's one of the things for me as well that every single thing that I have experienced that I was, like drawn into, everything as you're saying, like it all fit together. Like it's
Yeah.
not sometimes the same, it's not the same framework, it's not the same tradition. Somehow it all fit together. And one of the biggest things that I want to explore now with you, Kiki, is for me, the importance of coming back to my body, the somatic
Mhm.
practices were pivotal in my own journey and something that I work a lot with all of my clients because we in our society, we are mainly using our brains. We're mainly thinking, which is an amazing capacity that we have.
Hmm.
And at the same time, most of us, and I know that this was me when I was younger, super disconnected from the body, from the feelings, from the felt experience. And therefore, there's a lot of knowledge, wisdom, information that we cannot tap into and that we cannot actually reach just by thinking. You know what you were telling about the doing therapy, and then it's like you go through the the psychedelics or even the like some yoga practices, and that actually taps into, oh, there's, like some trauma, there's some blockages here. What is your experience with in our society and with the people that you work in terms of the importance of coming back to our body?
Ooh, great question. First is just like the when we think of oftentimes like even when we think spiritually, we think of like the thing out there, but we are an embodied species. We have a physical body for a reason. And it's like oftentimes people want to like maybe forget that, or like I'll talk sometimes people will be like, yes, but it's just up there, or like they get more like they think spirit is out here, and it's like no, spirit is actually in your body because that's what we're meant to be, is an embodied species. So I think that's one of the first things, is just reminding ourselves like that's the core of being human, is that we have a body, one of the main cores, that we get to use this body in all these really cool ways. um then it's also understanding. So I love what you said. Like, we live in a culture that is very mind focused, is very productivity focused, is very innovative. And all of that kind of is the way that we over accentuate the mind. But in healing work and integrative work, which I think healing is a process of integration, being that we're trying to bring all the parts of ourselves into union, into an embodied experience. Um, the literal only way to fully heal is actually to get into the body, because the body stores so much. Like books like When the Body, or The Body Keeps a Score, or Gabor Mate's The Body, When the Body Says No, really identify how much is happening in the body. And even more so, I would say, at the nervous system level, and learning how to attune to and understand our own nervous systems from a young age. We are all conditioned to override ourselves, telling us when to eat, when not to eat what to eat. Like, even just like you have to finish your whole plate if you're full. Those are slight ways that we're just conditioned over and over again to override the impulses of our own body. And because we are tapped into this pattern of override, one of the key places to start is learning how to attune and not override. My body is telling me no in this moment. It might be inconvenient for me to say no, but what happens when I actually learn to say no and listen to the fact that my body is saying, this isn't right in this moment? There's no logical reason why sometimes, but the body just has its experience, and learning how to move through that and listen to it, so much starts to unravel and be unveiled when we learn to attune to the body. And it's hard to say what that's going to be for each person. Um, but it's just like, we're supposed to be embodied. We're supposed to experience the fullness of our body.
Mm.
And when there is trauma, often what we do, and I know I was like this for a long time, sometimes the body starts to feel unsafe. And there actually is a physical felt unsafety in the body, where we'll dissociate, or we'll suppress, or we'll not want to feel what's happening in the body. So one of the first places is learning how to start to regain a sense of safety in one's body. And that can be a really long process.
Mm.
Um, but also a crucial process to being able to work into different layers of maybe trauma, or just different layers of like choosing oneself, not going with what you've been told to do, you
Mm.
know? So yeah, it's multi-layered in terms of the body, but it just
Yeah.
like we're supposed to be in our bodies.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that one of my teachers, I remember that he was always telling like me and everybody else about, was about embodiment. Everything needs to be embodied, everything needs to be experienced not just
Hmm.
known, because we want wisdom. Wisdom is only through embodied experience. And one of the things that you just mentioned that I think that it's so important that, when we're able to understand that most of us have been disconnected, have been dissociated from our bodies, have been suppressing or repressing or whatever it is, the mechanism that we have developed, it's really important to understand that safety. This is one of the things that a lot of times, um, when someone is looking for someone to work with or is trying to find a teacher, a mentor, a coach, one of the things that I often share with people is like, just make sure that you feel comfortable, that you feel safe
Hmm.
as a practitioner, as a facilitator. A lot of times the biggest thing that I can do is to, you know, in both energetically and physically and with my words and what I'm doing, to be able to create a space that people feel safe to experience and to allow things to show up or to come up, because that's when the healing takes place. And it's so important to be able to recognize as well that I have heard this from someone, one of my clients actually, a really interesting story. She came for the first session with me, and and she was telling me that she was working with someone else, and that other person told her, like to start actually expressing the no's or the boundaries from what she
Yep.
felt, and that she started to notice how that initially was empowering, but then it started to create a lot of more challenges in her life. So then when we started working, I told her like, how do you feel? Like, how do you know that what you're feeling is you? It's not protective mechanisms. It's like, how do you know when it's the actual truth, authentic you, your beingness actually speaking, and it's not your conditioning? And she was like,
Mm-hmm.
we never even worked on, like what it is on that. So we started to work a lot on coming back to the body, understanding, like, and and then she realized that yes, she wasn't actually making those, like what she was actually expressing wasn't what she actually wanted to experience. It was sort of her programming that was just fear. And I'm
Hmm.
like, cool, like you learned that part of communication, which, as you say, is really important, and as well to be able to have that understanding as the process of reconnecting and understanding, is this a yes or is this a no? Like, how do I know?
Hmm. Well, in that question, how do I know? Like early, a moment ago, when you said like we can know things, I actually don't believe you can know until you feel it in your body. I believe our sense of knowing comes from our body. We can think, we can deliberate, we can have certain understanding, but knowing what's right for me in each moment, at least for me, generally comes from, and I have like a process of doing that. Some of it for
Mm,
me is a verbal, I need to talk it out process, but it still is a process that I'll feel it in my body
mm,
that it's the right thing, will be pulled towards something. But
mm,
it's cool also what you said a moment ago about like learning what yes and no is in our body. A workshop I do with my partner, which is like anyone who works with me, it's mandatory they come to this workshop. It's a great place to start. It's about cultivating intimacy through consent, but it's consent with ourselves first. Consent with that I am honoring that I am a yes in this moment or I am a no in this moment. And one of the first exercises we have people do is feel without context what is a yes and what is a no.
mm,
And it's just like, and even that sometimes is they have a different sensation, and learning that they have a different sensation and being able to tap into this is a no, and I'm going to learn how to honor my no. And our society is actually really, I mean, I think maybe across all societies, I don't want to just say that's ours, but it's actually quite challenging sometimes to just honor our own no's.
mm. Yeah. Well, and that has to do, going back to understanding trauma and wanting
Yeah.
to actually belong and to be a part, and sometimes that actually takes precedent over our own authenticity, and the
Yeah.
more that we understand that, the easier it is to do that. And I say a lot of times to people that I work with is don't go and make life decisions as you're starting to, like with that yes or no, as you start to reconnect with your body until you actually develop that relationship with yourself to
Yeah.
fully understand the feeling of that. And I say, do something small, like go out to the street without a plan of where you're going, get to the corner and feel like, do I need to, like, is it right? Is it left? Is it forward? Is it back? And just follow that and, and
Mhm.
and just getting more acquainted with taking a moment to notice what your body's responding and where is it leading you. Is it leading you here, there, and not just the thinking. Whereas, like I always say, like this is amazing. Our thoughts, our mind, it's
Huge.
amazing.
Yeah.
Now, am I using that as an amazing resource, or is that using me? So there's that
Mhm.
path of, like experiencing, and as you said earlier, it's a process. And for some
Mhm.
people, that process is days. If they are ready, for some people, it's years. And this is one of the things that, uh, I get a lot of times, some people that they are so used to our Western medicinal system that it's like, okay, like I want to know this, or I want the cure for this. I'm like, okay, I have no idea how long this is going to take. Like, you're
Yeah.
doing your own healing, and like, you're not me, you're not anybody else.
Mhm.
Whatever it takes, it's going to take. But I think that it's so important to play, like to be curious, to play, to experiment with the different things and things that perhaps are not so big, to start getting acquainted with that.
Hmm. And aren't so rational. Because sometimes I know that's the thing when I work with clients is they're like, well, my body is saying no, but why is it saying no? I'm like, what if for a period of time you just trust that it's a no?
Mm,
Your body is knowing something that maybe our conceptual mind doesn't know, or we've been trained to override. Like I know in my felt sense, due to like trauma history, I had been ingrained to be attracted to and think certain types of people were safe who weren't because trauma started at so young. So I had to reorganize my entire nervous system and retrain it that I can learn what safety feels in my body. It doesn't have to be externally oriented. And I can learn how to trust myself, but also know that this thing I used to be pulled to is because of a pattern, is because of conditioning. And so, what happens when I don't get pulled in the way that I have for years? I stay centered in myself. Oh, and now I see that for what it is. And then all of that starts to change. So, but that's a long process, like you were saying. I I had a client the other day who just said, "How long is this grieving process going to take?" And
mm,
I'm like, I mean, I don't know. I can't possibly answer that question. Everyone's process is different. We learn things differently. We have different layers that we have to go through. And fundamentally, at a baseline, I don't believe we're ever done. Because if we're done, we're dead.
yeah.
So, this specific process of that specific grief, it will have a concluding point. But when you're grieving 10 years later, will it resurface again and remind you of grief you felt? Probably. So is
Mm,
it going to feel done or is it going to feel like it's reactivated or is it just reminding you like life is circular and
mm,
life and everything ties into itself. And so it's like that even that concept of when is this going to be done sometimes to me is like we need to restructure the way we're conceptualizing healing
mm,
or integration as it's a lifelong process. It
mm,
won't feel this strong forever. You'll be able to be with it with more easefulness. But will the process of grieving ever be done? No,
mm.
because it's a human process that you're going to be in until you're dead.
Yeah, I often say, I'm an ever-evolving being,
Hmm.
and yes, there's layers, or there's stages that actually, those cycles come to a natural
Hmm.
end, and until I'm dead or I am fully realized and enlightened, I'm still doing healing work all of the time,
Hmm.
peeling all of those layers. And I think that is important as well to understand, all of the different aspects that we have, and how do we activate something, or how do we actually get triggered by something, and doing the work from different perspectives to understand. And I'd love to get your take, Kiki, on from a psychedelics perspective.
Hmm.
I mean, this is a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, when would you, for someone, recommend that they actually explore with them, and how would that be? And I want to, throw it in a moment, because for a lot of times, people think sometimes, first this is unsafe, this is drugs, or it's
Hmm.
and sometimes some people that I know, for me, they are in a sense abusing
Hmm.
the plant medicines, or the medicines that, in my view, are an opening of things to then explore,
Hmm.
perhaps somatically, energetically, with therapy, whatever that looks like. And it's not like okay, you need to do thousands of this.
Hmm. Um, so the core of the question, just so I understand, is when would I recommend somebody work with psychedelics versus not? Is that the core of the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. For one, they themselves have to feel like it's the right thing for them. Um, Oftentimes there's an arc that I see almost everybody go through with psychedelics. I went through it. I literally see it with everybody. They do it, and then there's this belief of everyone just needs to do this, and then life would be good. Yes and no. Because if you're not yourself called to something, doing it, you don't have the yes in your body. So going to do it because someone told you, that's just as much conditioning as anything. So the first place is that you yourself, as your individual, feels a curiosity, a calling towards a desire to explore whatever modality it is. So that's first, that they have to have an innate desire
Mm.
um, towards the thing. Then honestly, it depends. Like, because it depends on what psychedelic they want to work with, what reason they have, what their intention is for working with it, how they're going to go about working with it. I recently had to have a really hard conversation with somebody who is in an active trauma experience and wanted to have a pop-up psychedelic where someone just holds it for them. That's not the right container. You
Mm.
need to have like trauma work, finding a baseline of safety in your body, titrate yourself into it, then have the psychedelic to relook at and open. Like you said, I love that word. It's an opening to look at it with a sense of safety. Till you have that, the psychedelic might provide a sense of safety while you're on it, because they do, particularly something like MDMA. Um, But we can't just rely on that sense of safety that is accentuated with a drug, because you're going to come out the other side and not have a true sense of safety in your body. So what are we going to do then?
Mm.
So it's like understanding that there's these pieces of work that should be done before psychedelics and definitely after. I don't even want to put it that way. It's just as important to do the work before as after. Often
Mhm.
we focus on integration as an after process, but the preparation informs the integration. So making sure that there is an arc that you're thinking of in terms of the work that you want to do, and that you're being real with yourself. Now that's a whole other thing, is how are we being real with ourselves when we have conditioning, we have all these things. But that would be kind of my main thing, is that they're coming at it at a time that they're not rushing into it. We can think the psychedelic is going to be the thing that heals me. No, it's going to help provide insight, opening, a release of emotion, access to things, all of this. Yes. And there's you're who heals you always. Always, always, always. We ourselves are the healer of ourselves. People can hold a container, people can hold space, people can inform, people can educate, all these things. But ultimately, it's how you are engaging with your own self and the world, with the insights, with the ways that the psychedelic has informed you and your own nervous system, that will be the healing.
Mm.
So, I hope that kind of answered the question. But from a baseline point, I guess I would wrap it up by saying, like, yes, they have to be called to it, and they're engaged in it in a way that understands the bigger perspective and not just thinking the psychedelic will be the healer, because that gets people in a dependent relationship. I've had a dependent relationship before with with specifically cannabis. And I knew it because it also depends on why you're using it and being really honest with yourself why you're using it. And what is the frequency? Do you actually need that frequency? Are you actually suppressing something? So again, working with somebody is also key in my perspective with psychedelic work. It's very hard to do this work just you and yourself without getting feedback from somebody else. I think it's actually quite dangerous to do that, if I'm honest. So it's also seeking the right guidance for you in alignment with what you're working on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I loved actually what you shared about the fact that we are our own healers. This is something that I feel like it's so important that, as you're saying, no plant medicine is healing you. They are openings, they give you insights, they give you experience. You're the one that needs to heal yourself and integrate that. No person is going to heal you. You know, I do this part of my work is I work as a like healing practitioner. I always tell everyone, I'm not doing anything to heal you. Like,
Yeah.
I'm saying that to be able to get them to understand, yes, of course, I am doing, as you said, I'm creating a space, a container, I'm facilitating a way, I'm educating, I am sharing. They're the ones doing their own healing.
Yeah.
And I think that something I want to explore, Kiki, because this is also part of what you were saying that you're doing with your partner. We do this inner healing work, and also we live with others.
Yeah.
um, you mentioned that you work with creating as well these spaces to actually understand and can you share a little bit more about the type of work that you do with in relationship?
Yeah. Great. Thanks for asking. So first thing I'm going to say is like in relationship. So I work with individuals and then me and my partner work with couples. And with an individual, the first thing is the relationship you have to yourself. We often forget that that is a relationship. We are actually in relationship to everything in the world. How are you in relationship to the weather, to a tree? Like, and this might sound silly to somebody, but it's like, we are in constant relationship with everything. So I actually view everything from the way in which we are relating or in relationship to the things external to us. In terms of how I work with couples in relationship, one of the first key things, so we have our consent workshop, which gives a framework of how to understand yeses and nos and how to understand forming agreements in a relationship. And then one of the biggest ways that we work with couples is actually helping them sit down and learn what agreements are, which are the container and the foundation for healthy relating. And we've basically never been taught that. Like, how are you agreeing to bring something challenging to each other? Do you just plow into it? Hey, I'm really angry with you. Or do you set up a tone around that? How are you agreeing who does the dishes each day? Is like, because these are all places that we tend to like get into fights. Almost every relationship has these core things that we fight about. And so we break that down with couples. And what is the agreement that we're actually starting point? What is the baseline starting point for these key parts of a relationship that you can lean on and come back to instead of getting into arguments? So that's one of the first ways that we work with couples. And then from there, that goes into sexual intimacy as well and helping people form really key agreements in the sexual realm, but in all aspects of relating to each other, because honestly, everything, I mean, even with your friends, we have implicit agreements with people all the time. which actually starts to be, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to do this for me. And they're subtle and they haven't actually been communicated. And eventually resentments build up because they aren't communicated. So one of the first things we teach people is none of that is real until there's been a verbal agreement, until
Mm.
you've brought to, and so I do this with friendships now. Hey, I'm noticing that this is how I'm operating and this is how you're operating. Is this how we want to operate? Is this right for both of us? And it
Mm.
just opens space for there to be clear communication and agreement of, yes, this is what this means to us. The other term we use is a shared meaning, that we have a shared meaning in what this relationship is at any level, friendship, family, partner, business partner. So it's teaching all of that to people and actually working with them with their partner in real time to create that.
Beautiful. I find it so important to be able to understand how to create conscious agreements because, as you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, we have so many implicit ones,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all of the time assumptions. And then
Yes.
through assumptions, then comes the challenges because
Mm-hmm.
we assume different things based on our conditioning or our understandings, and therefore a lot of things can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things that I feel like it's so important what you were saying, it's like understanding, you know, things aren't going to be all, beautiful and wonderful. Like this is part of our human experience, especially in relationship, any kind of relationship. There's going to be things that get activated. There's going to be things that actually are challenging, and then is how do we navigate them? And if there's no conscious understanding or agreement, as you're saying, then we don't know how we're going to do that. And if
Mm-hmm.
we take the time to explore that, then we mitigate the spaces where, things can go wrong in a sense.
Yeah. Well, we just did this work with a couple recently. And at the end of the session, they just looked at us and they were like, I feel like you just saved us so many fights.
Mm.
Because it's like we preemptively talk about the things that create friction. There's all these points. Like if you've had routine, like if you've been in different monogamous relationships or even polyamorous relationships, there's these friction points that are consistent in relationships. And it's like if you just go in and intentionally talk about them and how do you agree to relate to each other in those places, all of a sudden, when that surfaces, you already know how to act. You already know what you've agreed to in yourself. And again, it comes back to the thing we were talking about, knowing what is a yes or a no for me. Point one place that you have to start with anybody and that we start with people is learning what is yes and no for me. How do I tap into my desires? How do I actually name what I want? And then create that consciously with another person. And it's really cool to see it happen in real time and watch people be like, oh, now I know like I can bring this up or I know that I can do this because like we've talked about it. And it's just really cool work to be able to do with people in a way that it's like it's prep again in the thing like when we're thinking about psychedelics there's prep work, there's integration work. This is like let's prepare a relationship to flourish so that it goes well instead of what a lot of people do is we don't do this work at the beginning, things start sliding and then you have to go to therapy to fix what didn't happen the first time. It's like
Mm.
what if we just gave a framework for people to fully prepare themselves properly for what they're stepping into, the other side just becomes so much easier.
Yeah. And as you say, one of the biggest things in relationship is, as you're saying, understanding, ourselves, understanding, doing that work so that
Mm-hmm.
then we know, like, these are my boundaries. These are the things that I want. These are the things that are no for me. These are the things that are yes for me. This is the way that that I'm wanting to receive love. This is the way that I'm expressing love, or at least, what I know or my tendencies, so that then we as two people or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that is, then it's like, okay, so, these are your tendencies. So now I understand if this happens, I understand. Therefore, there's no need to escalate. We
Mm-hmm.
can actually, as you're saying, prevent so much by creating those spaces to understand and to have those core agreements in how
Mm-hmm.
to be in relationship. Yeah, I love that.
One of the main things too that we forget forget and that we drill in our workshop is what is actually my responsibility in a relationship? What is mine and what isn't mine? And there's lots of places in relationship where we unconsciously might take responsibility for someone else or project our thing onto somebody else to take responsibility for. That's really damaging in relationship. So the term we use is domain. I'm not going to get too deep in this about what is actually in my purview to be my right and my responsibility to look after. And when we think of it that way, it also then becomes like, then there's this time in relationship when you learn this kind of framework and you've developed agreements and all these things where it's like you can just hold space for somebody because it's like, I know that this isn't mine. And so I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not going to pick it up for them. I might support them and help them hold it in the way that they ask me to, in the way that we have agreed to, but it's also theirs. And it allows them to grow in learning how to manage that responsibility. And so that's a big key too, is knowing what's ours and what isn't.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think with that as well, there's so many interesting unconscious behaviors in terms of wanting to control a lot of things, wanting to control others, wanting to change
Mm-hmm.
others, and as well wanting to be a savior a lot of time. Like I know, like going back to like some previous relationships that I had, that I realized one of my tendencies, and this was unconscious at that moment, was that I was actually being the savior, or being the one that was actually ended up in a position that wasn't as a partner, just because of, unconscious understandings.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, okay, now I know. So finding something actually different and being able to even name that to
Mm-hmm.
someone else and be like, I know that I had this tendency, so that, if anything shows up that feels like that, do let me know. Because
Mm-hmm.
eh, like we all have, even, doing a lot of our healing work and everything, we never stop. Whatever we don't know until we can bring it into the light, into the conscious space. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to be as well, knowing those parts of us that we don't know if they are going to show up until we are in those spaces. When the
Mm-hmm.
other person knows, it's so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that was like another agreement that I had with, we can like say, this is how I want things to be. And then it's also how, as a partner, do you agree to help hold each other accountable to those ways? When I see you slipping, how do I help you in a way that's not going to disempower you? Because we can often do that in relationships without realizing, like the savior archetype is actually disempowering to the person we think we're rescuing. We're subtly telling them, we don't think you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so there's like all these like subtle ways in which we need to learn how to watch our own tendencies, which is what I'm hearing you say, and maybe ask your partner, hey, help me see if I'm not seeing it,
Yeah.
and find an agreement there of how you do that, while also not making it their responsibility. It is still our responsibility to watch our own tendencies and stuff. So that's like all the nuances of the agreements that we form with people in learning how to be our full authentic self in a
Mm.
relationship with somebody else,
Yeah.
which is hard, which is really, really challenging. And I just want to also acknowledge that it's challenging to be our authentic self,
Mm.
but
I
it's so
think.
rewarding.
Yeah, and it's that lifelong journey of,
Hmm.
reconnecting with that, and to be able
Hmm.
to fully live it, express it, experience it. I think that it's, and never ending until, as we said, we are not longer here.
Yeah.
Um, Kiki, as we're getting a little bit towards the end of this episode, we have talked about so many different topics, which was great. But I would love to invite you to share of all of this, or even something that we haven't talked about. Like, if you need to say something to everyone that you wish everyone knew, or someone that is listening, what would you like to tell them now?
That I wish everybody knew. Honestly, I think it's the main thing that we were just talking about. Um, Learn how to form conscious agreements in every single aspect of your life because it allows you to be authentic to what you have previously agreed upon. And it allows you to actually know and operate from a place of safety because I know what's expected here. Often anxiety in social structures is because we don't know what's expected of us. And then that creates this and how am I supposed to show up and how am I blah, blah, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas if we learn how to come into a workplace. What are the agreements I'm operating at? In a friendship, what are the agreements that I'm operating at? It creates the structure, the framework for us to be our embodied, authentic self. So if there is one skill I wish everyone knew and talked about more, it's learn how to make good, clear, conscious, verbal, expressed agreements, because that's the only way agreements happen is that both people say yes to the thing that we are saying in life. And I think a lot would shift if we knew how to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And Kiki, for anyone that is listening or watching us that is resonating with you and with your work, where can they find you? How can they work with you?
Yeah, thank you. I don't really have social media because I learned a long time ago social media is like pretty bad for my mental health. So I have a website, somahealing.ca. I'm Canadian, so it's .ca, not .com. Pretty much everything is up on my website. There's a workshops page so that people can get to the workshop. And the workshop is the best intro into the work. Like I said, if people come and work with me one-on-one, they get the workshop as part of our work together, but people can also just come take the workshop. It's 25 bucks Canadian, super accessible. And that I would say is one of the best places to learn a framework for like the agreements and everything I was just talking about. And you get to know me and my partner a little bit better. So yeah, somahealing.ca, best place that you can find me. Emails there, all those other places. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'll put the links on the show notes so that
Awesome.
it's easy for everyone to find it. Um, Thank you, Kiki, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. If there's anything that you found interesting, that you resonated with, if there's anything that you want to comment on, whatever it is that you're finding in this episode, let us know. Like, we'd love to continue the conversation. If you resonated with Kiki and her work, go and find her and message her and potentially work with her. And I hope that you're taking a lot from this episode. So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you once again, Kiki, for taking the time and for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll see you all at the next episode. Bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.